Welcome back to my video series on being an applied statistician in Jamovi. Today we're going to deal with a test called the Kruskal Wallis H Test, which is a non-parametric one-way ANOVA. I will explain what that means. So let's start by just going to our statistical test decision tree as we always do. And this is the Kruskal Wallis H test is a test of difference. This test is similar to two tests that we've already looked at, one the Mann-Whitney U test and the other the one-way ANOVA. Let me explain what that means. So this is a test of difference. It's an ordinal data test and it's for not normally distributed data. In that sense, it's very close to the Mann-Whitney U test. However, the Mann-Whitney U test is only for two groups. And as we can see here, the Kruskal Wallis H test is for three or more groups. So in that sense, it's like the Mann-Whitney U test, which we've already seen. However, you have more groups that you can compare. It's also like the one-way ANOVA, which also deals with three groups. However, the one-way ANOVA has a requirement that we have interval and normally distributed data. If, however, we have a three-group design or three or more group design, we're using interval data. And when we do the Shapiro-Wilks test, we find out that it's not normally distributed. We can then jump down to ordinal data and use the Kruskal Wallis H test. So let's look at a particular case. Let's look at the following research question. Is there a difference in the rank preference for poetry, literature review, and research report writing in three different classes: a meaningful literacy class, a basic writing class, and a 202 research class? So this is the question of whether you prefer poetry as your most preferred item, literature review as your most preferred writing genre, or research report writing as your most preferred writing genre in each of these three classes. Let's analyze the question as we always do. So do we have a grouping variable? Yes, we do. It's class type, and we have three classes: meaningful literacy, 101, 202. How many groups do we have? Well, we have three because we have the three classes I just mentioned. Are the groups independent? Yes, they are. I have different students in each class. What's my outcome variable? Well, it's a genre preference. It's a rank order. Poetry, literature review, and research report are being compared. 1 equals the most preferred writing genre, 2 equals the second preferred writing genre, and 3 equals the least preferred writing genre. The outcome variable, what data type is it? Well, it's an ordinal rank order data type preference comparing the three genres. So what do we need? We need a test that compares three groups of students with one ordinal outcome variable. So let's take a look at a schematic presentation of what this test looks like. So we have three groups: meaningful literacy, 101 and 202. They're going to do a rank order task. In this case, they're going to rank order poetry, research writing, research report, and a literature review. We have results for group 1, results for group 2, results for group 3. And then the test, in the same way as a one-way ANOVA, is done in two stages. First, we rank overall whether there's a difference in the rank order of the items in relation to all three groups. And then we compare each of the different groups, group 1 to group 2, group 2 to group 3, and group 1 to group 3. And we just look at a post hoc test, a very particular post hoc test, which compares the rank order of these three items. When can you use this test? When you want to compare the ranking of three or more groups of participants on the same measure to see if they're really different. Three or more groups for comparison for ordinal data. When we have three or more groups comparison for interval data, but that interval data is not normally distributed. We assume the groups are independent, which means we have different participants in each group, and we have at least 5 responses in each group. And with that, we're going to go over to Jamovi, and we're going to conduct the Kruskal Wallis H test. As you can see, I've opened up Jamovi, and I've also opened up a data set. Let's start by just looking at the variables. I'm going to go over to the variables tab at the top here, press it, and here we have a presentation of the variables. As you can see, there are 4 variables here. The first variable of interest to us is class type, and in class type, this is the type of class a student is studying in the writing class. And of course, as you know, we have Meaningful Literacy 101 and 202 that are being compared. And then I have 3 variables, each of which deals with the preferred genre ranking for poetry, research report, and literature review, and those 3 are being compared, with 1 being the most preferred genre of the 3, 2 being neutral, so the second preferred, and the third being the least preferred. In today's analysis, we're only going to deal with 1 of these outcome variables. We'll deal with poetry, but you would do the same analysis for all 3 of the variables. Just for reasons of simplicity, I'm going to deal with only 1. So let's go over to analyses. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to exploration. I'm going to open up descriptives. I'm going to put class type in for split, you'll see, and I'm going to put poetry into the variables item. Now, what I actually want here is I don't need standard deviation, I don't need minimum, I don't need maximum. I'm going to leave mean, and I'm going to get rid of median, and I'm going to put Shapiro-Wilk. Now let me explain my decisions here. Now this is true that this is ordinal data, but what I actually want is a mean rank order. I'm going to need to report that. So I need a mean rank order. So I need to create a mean for the different rankings that have been given. I'm also going to do a normality test. I don't need it for the Kruskal Wallis H test, but let's say that I thought that perhaps this data was normally distributed, and instead of looking at it as rank order, I wanted to look at it as interval. I could check if this is normally distributed. Of course, if interval data is not normally distributed, then I have to go over and use a Kruskal Wallis H test. So let's come over here. Let's go down to mean rank, and I can see that for meaningful literacy on the poetry preference task, it got a mean rank of 1.2. The poetry ranking in the 101 got a mean rank of 2.6, and for the 202, 2.7. I can also note that on the Shapiro-Wilk 0.001 significance, this variable is not normally distributed, as we know. It can also be nice to just see what this looks like between the 3 groups. So I'm going to do a histogram and put a density plot above it. And if we look over here down at this graph, actually we can see, remember, 1 is most preferred, 2 is second preferred, and 3 is least preferred. We're talking about poetry. For the meaningful literacy group, we can see we have a high frequency of people who really like poetry. However, for the 101 and the 202, we have high groups of people who don't like this particular genre. Okay, so that's our descriptive data. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to do the Kruskal Wallis H test. We're going to go over to ANOVA. And at the bottom here, you can see a one-way ANOVA Kruskal Wallis. That's a non-parametric, not normally distributed one-way ANOVA. Let me click on that. This is a very, very simple dialog box. I'm going to put class type in the grouping variable. Let me move that over. And I'm going to put poetry in the dependent variable. I could actually put all 3 of these variables in, but I don't want any confusion. I do want post hoc pairwise comparisons, right? I do want to know what happens afterwards, and I do want effect size. Okay, so that's all I have to do. Now let's look at the results I have here. So this is the Kruskal Wallis H test. You'll notice that this is a chi-square reporting. It's 19.3, 2 degrees of freedom, and this is highly significant. This effect size is epsilon squared. We have an epsilon squared of 0.664. When we understand the epsilon squared measure for effect size, 0.04 is a weak size, 0.16 is a moderate size, 0.64 and above is considered a strong effect, and we have here a very strong effect. Now what we want to do is we want to look at the pairwise comparison, Dwas, Steele, Critchlow, and Fligner pairwise comparison. This is a comparison that's a bit like the Mann-Whitney U test, if you like. It compares the individual groups and sees if there is a difference between the group. This is to allow us to situate exactly what group is different from the other group. In this particular case, we can see that the meaningful literacy class is different from 101. You can see a 0.001 significance level. The meaningful literacy class is also different from 202. Once again, a 0.001 difference level, but 101 and 202 are not significantly different from each other. And with that, we're going to go back and do the last thing that we need to do, which is to report this test. This is the language you use for reporting a Kruskal Wallis H test. Let me read through it with you slowly and explain which statistics we're actually reporting. A Kruskal Wallis H test showed that there was a statistically significant difference in poetry writing preference between the three different classes. The first thing you report is the Kruskal Wallis H test, and that's a chi-square. So you report the degrees of freedom. You then report the actual chi-square, 19.3, and then of course you report the significance level, which is 0.001. You then go on to report the actual mean ranks, which is why we did the descriptive analysis, exploratory descriptive analysis, with a mean rank poetry score of 1.2 for meaningful literacy, 2.6 for 101, and 2.7 for 202 writing classes. Finally, when we're reporting the Kruskal Wallis H test, you also want to report the effect size, and there was a strong effect size in this case, epsilon squared 0.66. The final thing you do here is you actually report on the post hoc test, the Dwas, Steele, Critchlow, Fligner pairwise comparison, and in this case there was a significant difference between meaningful literacy and the 101 and 202 classes. I've added in here the arrows so you can see exactly where to find each of the different statistics that you need to report. I hope this video has been useful for you. As always, I hope that you continue to do research and that you enjoy research, and that these set of videos and this particular video is helpful for you as you move forward. I look forward to seeing you in our next video.